Hello my friends, my name is Titan and welcome to this 19th episode of my very own Cities Skylines project, Vedastein. And today, as usual, we continue building this realistic small German town. And the plan for today is to, well, more or less finish the lower old town. And it took us, 5 episodes, if I remember correctly, to get to this point where we can say the lower old town is finished. And within the near future we will go on into the upper old town. And to be more precise, this 19th episode is about the bridge that connects the how could I say it? It connects the main market square with the other side of the river, or I think that makes sense. And then we are gonna do the cliff sides just below the upper old town, and those cliffs that are there for quite a while now, but always looked a bit crappy maybe, or a bit rough, a bit vanilla, if you may say so. So those are the two major things that we're going to do in this episode of today. But more about what I'm going to do, or what I'm doing in the moment. And what you see me doing here is building this, this inhabited bridge. And this is a concept of bridges that I like really much, because it has something special about it. It's just it's not a normal bridge with a normal bridge with water on both sides or whatever, but it's something special to have a bridge that is inhabited with houses. And in the real world you can find examples for those bridges in Florence or in Firenze in Italian, I guess. In Italy, the Ponte Vecchio, and that is the bridge where I got the inspiration for this very bridge from, the Krämerbrücke, or the Merchant's Bridge in Erfurt, which is a medium-sized, really beautiful German town. And this is where I, as I said, got the inspiration for this bridge that you see here. And the concept of this bridge is basically that is, for and foremost, it's a normal bridge crossing the river, but the special thing is that it has half-timbered houses on it. And you can only find a handful of bridges of those in the world, and the Merchant's Bridge from Erfurt is the oldest continuously inhabited bridge in the world, so this actually is something special. And I felt like it would be nice to also have such a bridge in Vedastein, because the motif of this bridge, or the look of those bridges, is really nice, and it's something unique that is interesting to have in the town. And you already see I'm using quite a lot POs lately, and especially in this episode you will see me using the procedural objects mod very often. And the reason for that is that sometimes it's the only way to achieve some things. For example, here the houses on the bridge, it would not be possible without procedural objects, because then the walls of the so if I would keep the houses on the bridge as normal buildings, their foundations would go into the ground, and that wouldn't look good, or that wouldn't work at all, because then the bridge would not be a bridge but more like a dam that water can still flow through. Whatever. So I'm using procedural objects for those houses. And also here I'm using procedural objects for all those tiny details like balconies, flowers, and whatever. I could just as well use props for that, but I'm using procedural objects because in this case it's actually easier to place them. Or at least I think it's easier to place them. And then of course it's good to have the possibility to adjust some of the procedural objects or props that I'm using here. So for example, on this balcony that I just edited, that I can move the poles of the balcony a bit inside, or this awning here, and that I can make it smaller so it fits the balcony beneath it. So it's quite good to have this possibility. And yeah, so this bridge, as you see, is, well, it's not very hard to make such a bridge in Cities Skylines if you know the if you know how to use all the necessary mods, I guess. It's basically PO, 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 and the procedural objects mod is really a mod that I lately really learned to love. It's extremely helpful mod. And of course, another advantage of using POs instead of props or buildings is that POs don't count to any limit. Or, I mean, they have a limit, but this limit is so high that it doesn't really matter. So you can use a lot of POs instead of props, which have quite a limited amount to them. So, this bridge. It's almost finished now, but I'm just detailing it a bit with some chairs, some shop displays. So there is, well, also on this bridge there is some detail. And in the real world, those bridges, of course, are not made for cars to drive on. So in modern times, usually they are only for pedestrians, lots and lots of tourists, of course. In Cities Skylines, or in our town here in Vedastein, as of now, I'm not sure if that worked or not, because there are not many people actually using this bridge. But then again, if I look on the population number, which is on about, not even 3,000 as of now, that might be one reason that there are not many people using the bridge. But yeah, we'll fix that, at least I hope soon enough. But while continuing with building the city, now as I'm finished with the bridge, I can continue with the other side of this river here. And again, I decided I want a small, maybe it's not a market square, but at least some kind of small urban square to be here. And so I'm going to do that. And another thing that's, well, I don't know, characteristic for this episode is that I'm using quite a lot of half-timbered houses here. Because I kind of like the idea of having one side of the old town with Renaissance houses, and of course the other side of the old town, so the upper old town, is stately Baroque houses with big gardens and whatever. And here in between those two areas, so densely packed onto the cliffside, I thought it would look nice to have half-timbered houses here instead. And to be honest, I think this turned out pretty nice and gives a more unique look to it than having the same style of building in every corner of the old town. And I think I actually also have an historical explanation for that, because, well, I think by now you know that when I'm building my town, I always have the story, the lore of the town in my mind, and think about how it might work and might not work with the setting we have. And the story for this half-timbered side probably would be that originally all the lower old town was half-timbered, or at least big parts of it were half-timbered, and there were only a few stone houses. And then probably during the Renaissance period, so somewhere about 1500, 1550 I guess, there was a big fire that destroyed most of the half-timbered houses on the left side of the lower Old Town. But because there was the river in between, those half-timbered houses here were not destroyed in the big fire, and so they were kept to this very day today. And on the other side of the small river we have many stone Renaissance houses, because all those or most of those half-timbered houses were destroyed, and then the people said, let's better rebuild in stone. And I think that makes at least enough sense to somewhat justify this this pretty distinct variation in building styles here, so close to each other. And when it's about the length of this episode and the content of this episode, again, I had to cut out quite a lot of stuff. I know you don't really have something against long episodes, and it's actually really good to hear that, so, or to know that. So I know that I can do that, but roughly you can say that for each minute that goes into the creation of one episode, I think I need at least 10, 15, 30 minutes more of recording and cutting and everything. Or maybe that was a bit exaggerated, but I guess you'll see the amount of work that goes in every minute of those videos, and so I personally don't like to do too long videos. So 35 minutes should definitely be a limit of video length, and the usual length should not be longer than 25 minutes is actually the goal, but yeah, I'm doing too much to actually reach this goal, so doesn't work. And yeah, behind the on the screen we just continue plopping some half-timbered houses along this riverfront, as we already did in the last episode. So all of that you see here is not really something new, and that's the reason I cut a good portion of it out, because you already know how I plot buildings, and I think it's better in each episode to focus on really new things instead of always show things that I'm doing the 100th time in a row or so. And as I now see it, those are still the vanilla train tracks. I'm so sorry for that. I haven't yet tried the new rail tracks by Ronix and Revo. I know they look so great, but I kind of fear that my RAM is not able to support those. So until I have more RAM, I think those vanilla wells have to be enough. I try to don't have them in the focus of the cinematics or in the focus of the videos, so at least they don't disturb the view of any of the cinematics or videos. And yeah, here we are basically in the mid-section of the video. So the first section was the bridge, and this mid-section is basically this as I already explained, piece of half-timbered housing along the river or between the river and the cliff side. And so now, as most of the buildings are plopped, we can do some roadside or road level detailing. And as I already said in the beginning, I want here on the other side of the river next to the main market square, I also want a small, if it's not a market square, at least a small urban square. And so again, I'm using the usual amount of stain decals, a fountain, tables, umbrellas, market stalls, everything that makes urban squares and historic squares look realistic. And when I'm doing that, I kind of noticed something, and that is that in the real world you of course often have some empty squares, be it because it's a market square and there is no market day, or because it's a modern square, which usually are kind of like empty, I guess. In Cities Skylines we usually fear to do empty squares, so just the pavement texture on it, and that's it. In the real world those squares exist, but for some reason in Cities Skylines, in the community, it seems to me we fear those empty squares. And I haven't quite found the reason for why we fear those, but you really only rarely see those. But yeah, whatever. It's just some thought that came to my mind. Now back what I'm doing here, it's just the usual stuff of bringing some life into the city or into the streets. And based on the location we have here, just so close to the river and with some stately half-timbered houses, of course there are restaurants and bars here, probably focused on tourists that have outside seating areas or seating arrangements. That's something that is very, very common in Germany, and probably not only in Germany, but it actually is also very common in Czechia, in Poland, for example. So pretty common in Europe to have those outside seating arrangements, and those I think really add something to the look of the city, because it does look more, I don't know, inhabited and actually used by people, even though those are just props. And now we are slowly getting to the last part of this episode, even though it's a pretty long part. In fact, it's still some 10 minutes that we have to cover here, and that is the cliff side here. Now, I already got some comments saying that this cliff is a disgrace, it's ugly, it needs to be reworked, and of course it just was a temporary solution for this cliff. And today we are tackling this cliff and make it into something more more friendly to look at, if I can say so. And one thing I'd like to do on this cliff is this this path or these stairs that lead upward to the upper part of the old town, and so also to the castle. And I'm not quite sure when those stairs or this path would have been built. I'm not quite sure if it was used in medieval times or if it was built later when there already was the upper old town. I guess that would be the case, but I think we'll get to the history behind this at the right moment. And it actually meant quite a bit of struggle to me to have the path aligned to the stairs that I'm using here. But in the end I think it turned out okay-ish. It's not perfect. I might redo it in the future, or at least improve it in the future, but for now it's okay. And with these retaining walls by Ronix here, you can already see what a big portion of this cliffside will be made of. Because I'm using those retaining walls quite a lot in this, or on this cliff. Because they have a look that, I don't know, that really fits the theme here, or the style I want to achieve here. And now we are approaching the part of this episode that I'm actually most proud of. It's not the bridge, even though I really love how this bridge turned out. But the part I'm most proud of this episode is the cliffside, or to be more precise, the terraced or the terraces along the cliffside. And in just a few seconds, on the right side, you see how I tried this technique and how I looked, how it looks, how it feels, and how it fits, and if it works and whatever. And what I included in this episode is how I'm actually in the end doing this these terraces along the cliff. And I think those turned out pretty well. And if you have a similar situation in your city or in your town where you have a cliff next to the town and you don't really know what to do with it, I can only encourage you to use those terraces. And this is something that was and still is used quite a lot in I guess middle European towns. For example, we have this here in Dresden, but you can also see it in the small town of Burghausen in Bavaria, or you have it in Český Krumlov or in Prague itself. And this is something that on the one side is pretty realistic to have, but on the other side it also really adds, I don't know, character to your city and gives your cliffside something unique and is more special than simply some trees placed along the cliffside. So yeah, it's nice to have. And if you I don't know, if you want me to explain it a bit better than just in this time lapse, which is more focused on Vedastein and not how I do this cliffside, if you want me to make a specific video about that, feel free to say so. I'm open for anything, so if you want to know how I actually did something with like a, I don't know, tutorial character or whatever, feel free to say so. I'm always open for that. And yeah, you already see that just by using a bit of terraforming on the cliffs itself and placing these terraces, the mountain already looks better. It looks more realistic on one side, but it also looks, it has more character and it feels more natural on the other side. And now that I'm placed all those terraces, I can bring some life into them, or better, onto them. And that is by plopping quite a few terraces, or actually for each lot that is there, or for each I'm not sure how to call it, for each segment of the terraces that belongs to a house, of course, or every of those lots or sections has its own terrace. Because if you live in the old town, if you have a really old house and you actually have the luck to have or to call some of those terraces your very own, you of course want to have some terraces to sit on, or some places to sit on there. You have your gardens on those terraces. You can see that in many areas that have such terraces built into the cliffside. And so I also did this here in this episode. So many people here have their private terraces, or basically have their private terraces here onto the cliff. And I'm guessing in the evening or in the summer they can sit on their terraces and have a look, have a view of the whole old town. And I think that's something really, really nice to have. And so how I'm decorating those cliffs is basically the same way I'm decorating backyards, because very generally spoken those are backyards for houses with a special form and shape around it, but those are basically backyards of houses. And so I'm using tile decals, I'm using tables and umbrellas, I'm using washing cradles and washing clothes, hanging thingies and pools and whatever. And I think that turns out, or that works pretty good and turned out nice. And the last thing which you will see me do in a few seconds is that I'm just doing a bit of a background for this episode. So I'm placing trees to cover the emptiness behind this cliff. Of course, in the future, when we build the upper old town, some of those trees at the top of the cliff will be removed to make place for the upper old town. But for this episode, I wanted there to be something in the background that kind of completes everything. But that all being said, this episode is slowly coming to an end. Have fun with the cinematics at the end of this episode. I think they turned out pretty nice and give you a good overview of what we did in this episode. There will be no episode or no usual episode till next year of Vedastein, though there still will be a video of Vedastein, you'll see what. But that being said, thank you for watching this video. If you are new to this channel, feel free to subscribe me and hit that tiny little bell icon so you get notified whenever I upload another video, be it around Vedastein or something else. And also feel free to comment, leave your suggestions or critique in the comments. And if you want to support me further, instead of just subscribing and liking, feel free to support me on Patreon, because my patrons have early access to videos or even early access to assets, sometimes months in advance. So that is maybe also something nice to you, but of course you don't have to, don't worry. And yeah, that's it from my side for today. We'll see us in the next video. Until then, have a nice time, take care of yourselves, have fun with the cinematics in just a few seconds, and bye.